Hey, what is up, everybody?
Welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast, episode 127. Today we are talking about the disappearance of Rey Rivera, which has been very highly requested by you guys. Tons of people have been talking about it in the true crime community lately because of the reboot of Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix. Really, really well done. And they did their first episode on Rey Rivera. There's so much more to look into than what they covered, though. So we're really excited to do this episode because we have so much to say about this case. It is so insane.
Yeah, and it's one of those just mysteries that have stood the test of time. And there's so many possibilities to this case, and there's just so many different theories to discuss as well. So we're going to dive very deep into all of that. But before we get into those news topics, I want to remind everybody that Kendall and Janelle's new show, The Sesh, launched. And you guys have 2 episodes out now?
Yeah, I think by the time this goes up, there should be 2 episodes out. And if you have not seen it yet, it's very different from Mile Higher. It's much more casual. It's a variety show. We're covering everything from trending topics on the internet, which we call spicy topics, to our last episode was mainly on astrology. So if you are interested in that type of stuff, I think you would really enjoy it. But every week is different. Like I said, it's very casual, kind of like, feel like you're hanging out with friends type of show. Just very, as we go, it kind of whatever.
Yeah, it's very chill. It's very,
what am I trying to say?
Because there's so many episodes of Mile Higher that, might leave you a little bit stressed out at the end, especially like today's, because some of these mysteries, I mean, God, they really send you into, down the rabbit hole and into all these thought loops. So it's kind of nice to have something more chill.
It is. And I like having something that I can just, connect with people more personally and just talk from my heart versus making sure we get all this information. We always have so much to go through that we don't have as much time for, conversation as much as I'd like.
The last episode we did specifically, like Kendall said, it was on astrology, but we talked about our own birth charts so that you guys could kind of get to know us a little bit better, but in a more fun way than just here's our about me. Yeah. So check that out if you're interested. And we tried to break it down in a way that makes sense if you're not at all familiar with astrology. But yeah, follow us. We'll leave the links down below so you guys can find us wherever on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. And follow us on social media at _sesh podcast.
But let's go ahead and talk about some of the news stories that we came across this week.
Yeah, so the first one is regarding a major storm that has been ravaging Iowa this past week. Specifically on August 10th, something known as a derecho went through Iowa and just destroyed a bunch of land and buildings and just wreaked havoc all over the state. Now, I've never even heard of this. And when you first look at it, it looks like it's pronounced derecho
or derecho.
Yeah, but it's derecho.
Derecho,
I believe is how you pronounce it. But a derecho is a widespread, long-lived straight-line windstorm that is associated with a fast-moving group of severe thunderstorms known as a mesoscale convection system and potentially rivals hurricanic and tornadic forces. So it can literally cause hurricane-force winds, tornadoes, heavy rains, and flash floods. So this area of the country is already known as Tornado Alley. So they already have to deal with tornadoes every year, but then to add on this hurricane force winds on top of all of that, including heavy rains and flash flood, I mean, this is just flat out scary.
Yeah, I've never heard of something like this. I actually had some subscribers messaging me about it from Iowa, saying that they're not getting enough coverage, and a lot of people are without water and power right now, really struggling, just devastated.
Yeah, over 250,000 people are without power in northern Illinois.
That's a lot of people. Why are we not covering this as much on mainstream news? Why do they pick some storms and not others?
Politics is more juicy for them to talk about.
But hurricanes end up having so much coverage.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Yeah, it's very weird how that works. That, if it's got Hurricane Andrew, they'll cover that, but not, just a...
Well, yeah, Hurricane Andrew was pretty insane. That was 12 years ago.
That's true. That's a bad comparison, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. They make a big deal out of the hurricane coverage. Sometimes they'll do days of coverage and, just hours and hours and hours, but then 300,000 people were affected by this and we're not really hearing about it.
Yeah. And not only that, over 10 million acres of crops have been destroyed there. And Iowa's obviously a big place for crops to be grown. Yeah. So that's going to have a major impact on the economy there in Iowa because so much of it is derived from crops and farming and all of that. So
Wow.
this is an absolutely devastating storm. And I guess it's kind of rare to have something like a derecho hit.
Yeah,
hit
it
there.
must be. I mean, or else we would hear about it a lot more.
Yeah. So for
That's
those
crazy.
that are dealing with that, I mean, hope you're all right and staying safe. And
We will leave a link in the description box for you guys to donate to those affected if you would like to help out, because they're going to need all that they can get.
absolutely.
We also have some NASA news this week.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. So NASA announced that in just 6 short months, if everything goes according to plan and testing all goes well, they're going to be sending NASA's Perseverance rover, which will be going to Mars and obviously landing on the surface of the planet. And once it's there, what's cool about this particular rover is that inside, there's basically this spring-loaded arm which will flip out a 4-pound helicopter called Ingenuity. And hopefully this rotorcraft, as they're calling it, will essentially be able to fly over the top of Mars, giving us an aerial view of the planet, unlike anything we've ever seen before. Because, I mean, the only types of rovers we've had out there in space have been crawling over the surface of the planet. And obviously, how much can you really see when it's just going across the surface?
That's so true. I didn't even consider how helpful a helicopter would be.
Yeah, well, not only, I mean,
It's like a drone.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they created their own drone to hopefully be able to fly over the top of Mars.
Get more of a landscape view.
Yeah, exactly. So the only caveat to this is that NASA's engineers don't know for sure whether or not this helicopter is actually going to be able to fly on Mars, because Mars' atmosphere is only about 1% the density of Earth's, and its gravity is way lower. And obviously, there's not a real easy way to test
Right.
that out here, other than in a controlled environment. But still, like, you just don't never know.
How can you mimic it perfectly?
So they could spend all this money and time getting this rover to Mars,
Gosh.
and it just doesn't fly and it doesn't go anywhere.
Wow, that would suck.
But if it does, it's going to be huge, because that's going to be able to open up so many more possibilities for, the search on Mars. Because is there still life on Mars? I think that's the biggest question still. There's evidence of life there in the past, water beneath the surface and everything like that. So maybe with a helicopter, we'll actually be able to see, into some of these areas that we've never even known existed before. And imagine the photographs like they'd be able to get
I
of
know.
that. Like,
I'm
how
like trying to
cool.
picture it. It would look really cool, and seeing the horizon, possibly seeing other planets from Mars.
Yeah.
It would just be cool to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Because, I mean, I think the plan is to hopefully get humans there by like 2040 or something. Like,
Yeah.
which
We're going to see it in our lifetime.
that's crazy. We'll at least see them attempt to get humans there. That's for sure.
I think they'll be able to do it.
I think so too. Probably. Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool that they're doing that. The other bit of news that we have is revolving around UFOs. We love talking about UFOs.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure we've kind of talked about this before. I know
Yes,
we've
for
mentioned,
sure.
the Pentagon and their whole program that was secret. Then they came out and basically announced it to the world.
Yeah.
But in that, they also said that they dissolved this particular UFO research program that the Pentagon was running. Well, they just decided that they're going to form a new task force to investigate UFO sightings, because obviously UFO sightings are not going away.
No.
There's continuing to be new sightings almost every
All the
day, it
time.
seems like. Yeah.
And now, especially with everyone having smartphones, everyone's capturing them,
Yeah.
on their own.
Yeah. And all across the world. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure UFO sightings are continuing to increase as the years go by. So, we're still unsure as to what those are.
Yeah, they're unidentified flying objects.
Right, right. Is it aliens flying around, or is it just, some type of drone or something like that? But that's the bigger mystery here. So their goal is to research these, UFOs, because for one, the military has come out and admitted that they have a number of different UFOs on record, and some of the videos that were released were of these particular UFOs, but they literally don't know what they are. They think that potentially, rather than saying they're aliens, that these could just be one of our adversaries, top secret, weapons or spacecraft or, aircraft that they have that we just don't know of. But there's nothing that's come out from around the world to suggest that that is true in the least bit. But that's what the government's really saying, is that these UFOs are most likely a threat and that we should be concerned about them because it could be, our enemies flying around stuff and
very well
doing
could
whatever,
be.
spying on us or whatever. So,
And even if it is aliens, they very well could be our enemies as well. It could be a threat.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting time in the UFO community. It's just so split, and there's almost, it's like this solid line down the middle of like people that believe, one narrative about it, that, these UFOs are a national security threat. And then the other side believe that these UFOs pose no risk to us whatsoever.
Possibly could be helping us.
Right. And if it is some type
humanity.
of extraterrestrial intelligence that they're here in peace and they're trying to maybe signal to us or, help us advance in some way. So it's very interesting. And, I don't know, I'm a little bit worried about, the military investigating this and, continuing to sort of push this narrative that they're a threat to our national security and that we should be worried about it.
Yeah.
Because
I am too. If you know anything about Project Bluebeam.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We should be worried about Project Bluebeam. If you believe in that theory or conspiracy or whatever, that, perhaps are going to fake some type of alien invasion or something like that through holographic, UFOs per se. Definitely something to consider, but
because we all know that fear is like the biggest aspect
right.
when it comes to control.
Absolutely. And a lot of people believe that like the next thing that we're going to need to be worried about is like being attacked from space. And that's what they're going to try to make happen so that, they're able to spend all the money they want and take control of space. I mean, ultimately the country wants to take control of whatever, entity that they're protecting or trying to gain access to. So they think space is going to be that next frontier that we're going to take over.
And used similarly to how they've used war in the past to control us and change the narrative.
Right. That we need to like team up against these space invaders and when in fact that it could all be.
We should do a whole episode on that.
What, Project Bluebeam? We could. We could
let
dive
us know
down
if you
that
guys
rabbit
would like
hole
to see
for
it.
sure.
I'm surprised we haven't. We've talked about it so many times that it feels like we have, but we haven't actually fully gone over the theory.
No. There's a lot of theories we haven't fully gone over. So. Yeah, let us know what you guys think about that. But let's go ahead and get into the absolutely mysterious disappearance of Rey Rivera. But before we do, we'd like to thank our first sponsors for today. I don't know if any of you guys can relate, but my skincare routine sucks. I often find myself neglecting my skin on the daily because here's the cold, hard truth, guys. Your skin has needs, and if you want it to look as good as possible for as long as possible, you need to address them now. We get it. You might not know where to start, but there's a company that's taken all the guesswork out of it for you, and that company is Lumen. Lumen is on a mission to help give men the amazing skin they deserve through high-quality, expert-curated products delivered right to your door. All their products are formulated specifically for men's skin and made to target skin issues with maximum efficiency using top-notch ingredients like charcoal, green tea extract, and vitamin C. So all that natural goodness. Now, I've been using Lumen skincare products for about 2 weeks, and I gotta say, guys, I struggle with kind of oily and dry skin, and Lumen has completely restored my skin to another level I have never seen before. Go to lumenskin.com/milehigher to get a 1-month free trial of everything you need to start your skincare journey at home. That's lumenskin.com/milehigher to get your first month free. lumenskin.com/milehigher.
I know most of you have heard of HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. HelloFresh gives you fresh, pre-measured ingredients and mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. Lets you skip all your trips to the grocery store, making cooking fun, easy, and affordable. And there's something for everyone when it comes to HelloFresh. They have low-calorie options, vegetarian, family-friendly recipes every week. And HelloFresh now offers contactless delivery to keep you and your family safe. HelloFresh's carbon footprint is actually 25% lower than store-bought grocery-made meals. And you can add little things to keep your fridge stocked, such as extra proteins or extra sides of garlic bread if you like that. This week we made a really good sun-dried tomato and basil spaghetti, and it was excellent. So check out HelloFresh today at hellofresh.com/80milehigher and use the code 80milehigher to get $80 off, including free shipping on your first box. Additional restrictions apply. Please visit hellofresh.com for more details. Again, that's HelloFresh.com/80milehigher and use the code 80milehigher to get $80 off. All right, so let's get into the Rey Rivera case. This one is pretty insane. So Rey was born on June 10th, 1973. His parents were Angel and Maria Rivera. And he also has a brother named Angel, who Janelle and I agree is very good looking. Rey attended film school and also worked as a financial writer and freelance videographer in California for Agora Incorporated.
Yeah, that's the real big thing with Rey is he's definitely into film and filmmaking, and that's definitely his passion in life. Is he really had dreams and aspirations of working in Hollywood and working on big budget films and all of that.
He actually stopped working for Agora full time in 2005 and took a contract job producing videos for the same company instead.
Yeah, again, he's just really passionate about filmmaking. So right around this time that he quit working for Agora, he also got married to his longtime love, Allison. And they got married actually at a private ceremony in Puerto Rico, and they planned to start a family together.
But Rey didn't feel like his work as a freelance producer was stable enough to support his family. So that's when Rey's old friend, Porter Stansberry, offered him a job at his company in Baltimore called Stansberry and Associates. Now, this becomes very important in this case. This is a financial services company that provides investment advice and research.
Yeah, so basically they, help you buy stock and all of that. And they also have like newsletters and articles that they put out for, like what types of stocks you should buy and kind of give people and their clients financial advice. So the thing about Porter Stansberry is that him and Porter knew each other all the way back to high school. They actually went to prom together. They were longtime buddies, went to college. So they were like best of friends. And so it was great timing for Rey because he really needed a more stable income. So Porter said, hey, why don't you come work for me? So that's exactly what he did. And Porter's company is actually a subsidiary of Agora.
They were on the same water polo team and knew each other really well. Porter even went to Rey and Allison's wedding in Puerto Rico, and he flew in on a private helicopter. So Rey was excited to start this new job at Porter's company. So when he accepted the job, he and Allison relocated from California to North Baltimore. Big change.
Yeah, and one thing I want to note about that is a lot of people seem to think that he went there without Allison, that there was a period of time when he first moved to North Baltimore where Allison wasn't actually with him for a short period of time.
And we don't fully know that.
I'm pretty sure we do know that there was a time period. I don't know if it was a couple weeks or a month or whatever.
Unclear.
It's kind of unclear, but it is important to note that she wasn't there from day one as soon as he moved to Baltimore.
So he was working at this company as a financial writer and a videographer. And what Rey really wanted to do, like we mentioned earlier, was write movie scripts and make his own films one day. Very creative person.
Yeah, I mean, he would spend hours and hours of his free time, writing in his journals and coming up with scripts and screenplays and all that. He was really passionate about filmmaking for sure. But by all accounts, Rey's life seemed to be right on track. He was a tall 6'5" and handsome with a contagious smile.
Yeah, he was good looking too. That whole family.
Thirsty over here. So
I think someone's hot without being thirsty. What the fuck?
Yeah, we ain't thirsty. We just know what good looking people look like, okay?
Don't be jealous.
Yeah, Josh's like, okay, thirsty.
But at this time, Rey was truly happy. I mean, from all accounts of everybody around him, he seemed to be really enjoying his life. This was like a great move for him and Allison to, go to Baltimore and work for his friend Porter's company. And they had a really nice house in Baltimore too. So they were kind of living the dream. Like everything was seemingly, working out the way that it should have been. So there was no sort of, red flags or anything like that initially.
Or so it seemed.
So as far as what we know, Rey and his wife Allison had a very close and loving relationship. And once when Allison was away for work, she found a lucky penny with the shape of a heart cut out of it. And when she got home, she gave Rey the penny and told him, whenever you need me, you hold this penny and know I'm close.
Oh, that's cute. Rey put the penny in a bowl on his dresser. And Allison had also given him a money clip. And this is very important in this story. This was a family heirloom. It's really cool looking. We'll put in a picture if you're watching. Very unique piece. And this was something that Rey always had with him. He used it, as a wallet to hold his ID and cards and cash and stuff like that. But it was just kind of a part of who he was. Like multiple friends say, yeah, Ray always had that. He would never, get a different wallet or anything. It was a hugely important item to him.
Yeah, absolutely. So at this point in time, everything is completely normal. There's nothing that seems weird or out of the ordinary as far as we know before Ray goes missing.
So in the spring of 2006, Ray was 32 years old. He had no history of mental illness and no public enemies either.
But he had grown tired of the 9-to-5 life, and he wanted more freedom to pursue his creative career. And according to his friend, Porter Stansberry, and also his employer, Ray had actually resigned from his job at Stansberry and Associates 6 months prior. So again, he wasn't like an employee there, but I think there was kind of some contract work going on there. But he was, trying to pursue his dream of, being a screenwriter. Now, Porter said that Ray didn't have a plan when he quit and that he was under a lot of financial pressure. And that's just according to his friend. So at this period of time, according to Porter, the relationship was still good. There was no, hard feelings or anything like that between them after he stopped working for him. Now, what's also interesting is that Ray and Allison had actually planned to move back to California because that's where they were from. And after a trip to Los Angeles, Ray started acting strange. It seemed like he was nervous all the time, and he started worrying about Allison whenever she left the house.
That's concerning.
It is. So during the few weeks leading up to his disappearance, something seemed to be bothering Ray a lot. And at one point, someone even tried to break into their house a few times, tripping their home alarm twice. There's 2 separate incidents where just in the middle of the night, I think it was 3 a.m. or something. It was
so creepy,
really late. And all of a sudden their alarm system started going off and they would call the police and everything and there would be nothing. But what they did find, I believe on the second time, was that one of the windows on the main floor had been messed with and somebody had been trying to get into the house. So from all accounts, it looks like somebody tried to make access to the house, but they didn't. And the police kept chalking up to a squirrel or something.
Say, I thought it was squirrels.
Squirrel setting off the alarm. And
They're like, oh, it was the squirrel that ruffled something. And then
okay.
How does that even work? First of all,
yeah, why would a squirrel set off an alarm?
More like they don't want to investigate.
They just have a squirrel lifting the bottom of the window, trying to get in. Oh my God. That makes no sense. But that's apparently what the police told Allison and Ray. But obviously this freaked the couple out a lot, and especially Ray. On the first time that this happened in the middle of the night, Ray shot out of bed and ran to the basement with a baseball bat. And Allison said that when she found him, he had this crazed look in his eye and was just petrified, like terrified. She's like, I'll never forget this because the look of fear in his eyes in this man was just beyond anything I'd ever seen before. So that right there tells you that
He's worried.
He was worried that somebody might be trying to get into the house, and he may have known prior to this incident.
Or just that he knew of someone who might want to hurt him or Allison. Him being worried about her leaving the house. I mean, it's obvious. He probably got into some shit and was starting to get freaked out about it.
Right. So both of these events really just triggered Ray, and he became very, very stressed after all of this. A week before he disappeared, Allison was actually training for a triathlon, and she was going to the local track in order to run sprints. She always went by herself and never had any issues. But on this particular day, Ray insisted that he go with her, even though he was working on a deadline at the moment. The track was usually full of people walking and exercising, but it was raining and almost completely empty. And that's when Ray saw a man approach Allison. So he ran out to the track and freaked the fuck out. Ray seemed extremely terrified for her life, even though at that point the man hadn't done anything and left shortly after. But the fact that he's just paranoid to the point where he sees anybody approach her, to me, that just signifies that he was worried that somebody was going to come and hurt either of them.
It's possible he knew of someone threatening to hurt her.
Right. There was some type of threat.
Won't even let her be alone. I mean, it's so obvious.
But she doesn't know this. She's being kept in the dark about whatever he's worried about at this point in time. She's just like, he's acting weird. And this was unusual for Ray. Like, it was definitely a major change in his behavior and just his personality. He became very almost paranoid and scared, and definitely wasn't acting like his normal self. Like she remembers that 100%. What's also interesting is that during these few weeks leading up to his disappearance, Ray started reading The Builders, A Story and Study of Freemasonry by Joseph Orr Newton.
Bing, bing, bing.
Freemason.
There's so many cases where the person was really into Freemason stuff and then they like disappeared or something weird happened to them.
Oh, yeah. And, there's so many conspiracies surrounding the Freemasons, a secret society, for those that don't know, a fraternal organization, which, a lot of people just say it's like, any other fraternity that just happens to be a secret society as well.
We get comments all the time from people that are like, oh, my uncle or my dad or my grandpa's in it.
My grandpa's a Freemason.
Nothing. Yeah, your grandpa is.
Yeah. Or was. He's
But I mean,
not
that's
one
what
now,
we're
but-
told, right?
Yeah.
There's some interesting things when it comes to Freemasonry.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest theories is that they're somehow, a part of the New World Order conspiracy, and, people that are in the high, levels of government and, Illuminati potentially are also Freemasons. But again, we don't know for sure. But it is interesting that Ray was really diving deep into Freemasonry.
It is.
Because there's a quote from the book that reads, "Man was not meant to be a cringing being, eaten up by anxiety, shut up a prisoner in silent loneliness, living in blind cruelty. He was meant for great adventures. If he has the insight to see the laws of life and the key of kindness to unlock the doors, and in his quest for the best in others, he will discover something in himself not guessed before. For each of us, though, we may not be clever or commanding, but only average and unknown. Life can be winged and wonderful, full of meaning and music, if we have the faith to trust the God who made us and the wisdom to live, love, and learn." That's a very almost like cryptic quote. I feel like very deep too. So Ray was absolutely fascinated by the Freemasons, and he wanted to learn as much as he could about the organization, because he believed that the Freemasons could be controlling various aspects of the movie industry in Hollywood, which he thought, hey, if I can get into the Freemasons, then maybe that will help me get, that job in Hollywood that I want, and hopefully get me in that inner circle. Yeah, absolutely. We know that this is true because Ray actually had several conversations with Brad Hopman, his close childhood friend, about joining the Freemasons. And he was very interested in the 1999 film by Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut, which is an erotic psychological drama about a secret society. So it's almost like I wonder if he wanted to be a part of it to be also part of it because it's a secret society, or if it was just more of a career move for him. Like, I just want to join it to then get me that job. But it seems to me like he was actually really interested in being just a part of a secret society.
Well, I feel like joining Freemasons is a pretty big deal. I mean, it's not just something you would do to get a job, right? You'd probably research it a little more than that and try to understand what it is.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like you can just go sign up and get into it. You got to be invited into it. So maybe he was trying to figure out a way to be invited into it. Like, maybe if I know enough about it, then they'll let me in, or I'll get an invite from somebody. But the weekend before he disappeared, Ray stayed in bed for a whole day and seemed very depressed. The week before, he had actually asked Brad if he could stay in his top floor Jersey City apartment by himself. His friend Brad thought this was a very strange request, and he felt that Ray was acting, quote, really, really weird. But he ended up returning the key to Brad before actually making the trip. That's very interesting, and I don't know if there's any significance to that at all, but he was planning to go be by himself in this apartment.
It's weird that it's a top floor thing.
Yeah.
I mean, for reasons we'll get into. But
yeah, it is. That's a good point. Absolutely. So on May 14th, Allison and Ray went to church for a special service for Mother's Day. Once they got home, he made a call and left a voice message, which Allison overheard. And it said, quote, "Hey man, give me a call back. I finally got it all figured out." And they find out that it is Porter who he had called. And Porter was unclear what it meant and didn't have any other insight to provide about this when Angel, Ray's brother, asked about it later. But, "Hey man, give me a call back. I finally got it all figured out." This is 2 days before he goes missing. So right there, that's telling me that Porter knows something.
Yeah, 100%.
He knows something about what's going to happen next.
So let's talk about the day that Rey actually disappeared. It was May 16th, 2006, and it just seemed like any other normal day at the Rivera household. At the time, Rey and Allison had a house guest staying with them, and Rey was having a busy day as normal. Early in the day, he had a conversation with a member of the Maryland Freemason Lodge, and they talked about his interest in joining. Then he went out for a bit and bought Freemasons for Dummies at a local bookstore.
That's really interesting that
That
on
is.
the very day he disappears, he's seemingly trying to get into the Freemasons.
Yeah. He calls a video technician company to rent equipment for the weekend, and this call was made around 4 p.m. And a worker noted that Rey seemed pressured for time, but overall laid back and friendly, and he seemed simply pressed against making a deadline.
Stressed out. Just completely stressed out with everything going on.
And then Rey's just back at the house working, and at one point he receives a mysterious phone call, and the house guest that was staying with them took note of this, but they assumed that it was just a call from work. Now, we don't know who the house guest is, which is kind of weird. But shortly after taking the call, Rey suddenly hurried out of the house around 6:30 p.m.
Like frantically leaves the house.
Frantically.
Like, just in a rush, doesn't like get ready or like do anything.
Gets off the phone and leaves.
He's just wearing flip-flops and normal clothes because he's just been working from home that day and takes off.
And he had his phone with him when he left. And they also think that he probably had that money clip I was telling you guys about at the beginning of the show. This was something that he had got from Allison. And like I said, he always had it with him. He had about $20 in cash, and he left in Allison's car. And after that, Rey never came home.
Just disappeared.
Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah.
It's like one of those disappearances that just gives me chills. It makes no sense. And it really seems like he left on purpose. But where did he go?
Right. So later that night, Allison's trying to figure out where he went. Nobody's seen him. Nobody's heard from him. They can't call him on the phone. The phone's dead. So that at that point, they start freaking out because they're like, okay, something clearly happened to Rey. This is very unusual for him to not let me know where he went or when he'd be back. So that's when Allison contacts the police. And basically, they spend that night just frantically trying to call around to all the hospitals, all the normal things that you do if somebody goes missing. You call the hospitals to see if maybe got in an accident or something. And there's just a, John Doe somewhere that, is unidentified for some reason.
Or he's confused.
Or something like that. And, calling around all over the place and nobody has seen him.
No, it's like he just vanished.
There's no traces.
Rey's brother Angel was very, very concerned about him. He actually flew in from Orlando that night. So he knew something was just completely wrong. Porter Stansbury also joined the search efforts and offered a reward amount for $1,000, which isn't that much. I mean, this guy's does pretty well. But anyway, he also tried to hire a private investigator, and Porter upped the reward at that point to $5,000.
Which both of those things are kind of up in the air. I think I haven't seen concrete evidence that they actually hired a private investigator. I believe that Porter was looking into it or maybe started that process. And I also saw some people that said Porter raised the reward money to $5,000. But then again, the flyers that they put out said $1,000 reward for information leading to the return of either the car or Rey. Because at this point, they knew he left in Allison's car, but nobody had even seen the car as well. That was missing too.
So Allison and Angel searched all over town that night and even contacted the media for help.
And lucky for them, the media actually took them somewhat seriously. Like they got media coverage right away on this. And they started running stories about, there's a missing man. Have you seen this guy? And so basically everybody in Baltimore was looking for Rey at this point.
But for the first few days, there was really nothing. And Allison was so worried. I mean, she really, really loved Rey and could not believe that he was just gone. And she didn't have any answers. So after several days of looking for him, their family was just literally driving around the city, seeing if they could spot his car. If they can find his car, maybe they can find him. And they finally did find his car. And it was in a parking lot off St. Paul Street near his office. But Rey was nowhere to be found. There was no other clues left behind but his vehicle. But this does help us to know that at some point he that's where he took the car.
Yeah. Or
which this is Allison's car.
Yeah, exactly. So it does at least give you, sort of an epicenter to start a search from. Because clearly the car got there some way, and we know he left in the car. So most likely he drove to this parking lot. But, at this parking lot, they're like, where did he go from here? We have no idea.
I know it makes it more complicated, but, it's better than nothing.
And obviously when they found the car, they searched through his car. They turned it upside down to try to find any clues whatsoever, or look for, maybe a cell phone or something like that was maybe left in the vehicle. But there is absolutely
nothing,
no clues or evidence to suggest where Ray had gone in the vehicle.
That's crazy. Imagine how you'd feel as a family just with nothing.
Like you're like, oh, we found his car. We'll find something, or, a hint or a clue of where he went. And
more confused.
No. And there's just buildings, high-rise buildings all around this area. So not long after they found Ray's vehicle, they decided to start looking in the surrounding areas to see where he might have gone. Now, a few of Ray's coworkers, actually, who also happened to be his friends, decided to go take a look at the top of a parking structure, which was right next to the Belvedere Hotel, which it's actually called the Belvedere Building now. The hotel was a very historic building that's been in this Mount Vernon neighborhood in Baltimore for a very long time. In fact, it was constructed in 1903, but they actually converted the hotel into condos in 1991. So when Ray's coworkers went to the edge of this parking structure, they looked over onto the lower roof of this annex of the Belvedere Building. And that's when they noticed a hole in the roof. And this was a pretty small hole too. It wasn't like the whole roof caved in or anything like that. It looked like something had literally just fallen from the sky and put a hole into the top of this building.
Something heavy enough. But it wasn't massive.
Because, this building, it's got like metal structure underneath it to provide support for the roof. So something had to have fallen with great force in order to put a hole in it. But of course, when they discovered that there was just this unknown hole that the building didn't know about, they told police. And that's when police actually went into this annex part of the building and discovered Ray's decomposing body, which was just lying beneath the hole, essentially. And this was 6 days after he had disappeared at this point.
Yeah, the people who went, and actually found him said that it was pretty rough, the scene. Like, it was just disgusting.
Yeah. Decomposing for, 6 days definitely is going to be rough. And then not only that, his injuries were extremely severe, which we'll talk about what happened with him there. But obviously, speculation around what happened to him began immediately. And unfortunately, if he was murdered, or he was pushed, if it wasn't suicide as it looked at first glance, it was nearly impossible to make out, any determination as far as any other injuries from somebody else because his body was in such poor condition. In fact, the detective that had originally worked on the case said Ray's autopsy was brutal reading. Multiple ribs fractured, punctured lungs, lacerations, damage to his skull. The right leg had 2 different breaks in it to the point where the bone was protruding through the flesh. Now, all these injuries were consistent with a large fall, but there was also some unexplained injuries, and the medical examiner who performed the autopsy actually declared the cause of death as undetermined, meaning that they didn't feel there was enough evidence to prove suicide. Because I think just off of first glance, everybody's first reaction to this is that he must have jumped off of the Belvedere building and fell through the roof.
From a top story to that roof, because the roof is like halfway up.
So based on the fact that there was a hole in the lower annex roof of the Belvedere building and the fact that Ray was found in the condition he was found in, the police really were leaning towards suicide. And even though the medical examiner said that it was undetermined, that was still the sort of route the police were going with the investigation. Now, what's crazy is that the police actually found Ray's cell phone and his sunglasses on the lower roof, which he had fallen through. And what's crazy is that there was barely any scratches on them, and his cell phone actually still worked.
No way.
So if he jumped off of the building, which this is, over 11 stories tall, I think it's like 14 or something in total, his cell phone, if it had been with him during the fall, would have scratched at least.
Probably.
Or
I mean,
broke.
especially if it was separate from, if it was like in his pocket the whole time, it'd be a
Right.
different story. But it being found out, it almost seemed like it was possibly placed there.
Yeah. And the detective that actually was on the scene originally said it appeared staged, because whose sunglasses don't break after falling with them
Yeah, for real.
that far? There's no way. And not only that, they recovered the flip-flops that he was wearing. And not only that, one of the flip-flops had a strap completely missing, but they were mostly fine. Also, probably the most notable thing was that Ray's money clip was never found. That heirloom that he carried around with him was never located. And Allison especially thinks that's very, very weird that he wasn't found with that money clip, because he should have had that on him.
Yeah, is it possible someone took it?
It is possible, for sure. So the only thing that the police found on Ray's person was the penny with the heart-shaped cutout that Allison had given him, and that was found in his pocket. Now, this penny was always in the bowl on Ray's dresser, and unlike the money clip, he never took it with him. So Allison had no idea why he happened to take the penny that day with him. And the only explanation is that he knew he needed to feel extra support and love to get through whatever challenge he was about to face.
Yeah, I bet that's it. Or maybe he knew he wouldn't be coming back.
Yeah, he
and
just
he
wanted it with him.
The memory of her, yeah.
And once investigators learned about this mysterious phone call that Ray had answered prior to leaving the house for the last time, the police thought, hey, okay, we've got something there. Clearly, whoever called him may have had something to do with his death and his disappearance. So they were able to trace the call, and when they traced it, it went back to a switchboard at Agora, so the company he had been working for. But there was no way for police to trace it any farther than that, because obviously the switchboard is going to have a bunch of extensions off of it, and they weren't able to nail it back to a specific person.
Right.
So it was really kind of, a glimmer of hope, but then it quickly died.
End. Yeah.
And when police interviewed the house guest that had been staying with him, and again, we don't know who this house guest was. As far as what we could find, I couldn't find a name, or I don't even know if they've ever released who this person was that happened to be at the house. It's very weird.
House guest.
They refer to him as house guest that was staying there.
Or her, we don't know.
Yeah, him or her. And apparently the house guest overheard some of the conversation. They said it sounded like Ray had forgotten something significant. It was almost like he was late for an appointment, and getting there was extremely urgent. And I guess this house guest was a she, and she has cooperated with police, but has chosen to remain anonymous throughout all this, because I think they are fearful of whoever did this to Ray, might take retribution on anybody else that is somehow helping in the investigation. But the fact that she wanted to be anonymous is definitely interesting. So during the investigation, the police ended up searching Ray and Allison's computers. And on the day Allison was scheduled to pick them up from the police station, someone called multiple times asking about the computers and wanted to come get them. And when the police told Allison about these unusual calls, she had no idea who this caller could be, but it definitely left her with a terrible feeling. Allison then told the police about their security alarms going off 2 nights in a row shortly before Ray disappeared. And it was at that point that the police actually went to the house and fingerprinted that windowsill that she said they were trying to get into. And I don't think anything came out of that, but that was at the point that the police were like, oh, it must have been a squirrel that set it off.
Yeah, should have done that way sooner.
Yeah, which obviously Allison's like, what do you mean it's a fucking squirrel? Like, clearly there's something going on here. Somebody was trying to get in.
And then the whole situation at the track as well, how the man just walked up to her.
Yeah. I think she started piecing it all together and realizing, holy shit, there was
somebody after him.
Yeah. So again, because police really didn't have anything to go off of, there was really no evidence that suggested foul play for them to really investigate. And, from all of the injuries he sustained and, the hole in the roof, the police really quickly came to the conclusion that Ray committed suicide. So that was essentially what they went with. And even though the medical examiner ruled it undetermined, that's where they stopped their investigation. So before we get into some of the many theories that are out there regarding Ray's death, we'd like to thank our last sponsors for today. In a world where you literally do everything online, you want to make sure that your data is safe and secure, and that there is no way for hackers or your ISP to track what you're doing online. That's where ExpressVPN comes in, because it allows you to access the internet as if you're from a different country. What it allows you to do is unlock thousands of new shows and movies from streaming libraries around the globe ExpressVPN works with many streaming services, Netflix, Amazon Prime, BBC iPlayer, YouTube, and so much more. And you can choose from almost 100 different countries. It's so simple to use. Just fire up the ExpressVPN app, change your location and hit connect, and then boom, refresh the page and the show or movie you want to watch will magically appear. Seriously, it's the easiest, the fastest, just the overall best VPN service out there. And who doesn't want a larger library to choose from when streaming? So if you use my link right now at expressvpn.com/milehigher, you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/milehigher.
You guys, I cannot say enough good things about Native deodorant. If you haven't heard of Native deodorant, it is a natural deodorant that is made of things such as coconut oil, shea butter, and tapioca starch. It's vegan and it's never tested on animals. And I know a lot of people think that natural deodorants just don't work as well, but that's just not true. It takes a couple weeks for your body to get used to it, but when it does, it works phenomenally. I personally really love the coconut vanilla. It just is great for the summer. It's very light and beachy scent. What's so cool about Native is you can try it out risk-free. Every product comes with free shipping within the United States, plus a free 30-day return and exchange period. So do what I did and make the switch to Native today. I promise you will never want to go back. You can go check it out at nativedeo.com/milehigher and use the promo code milehigher20 at checkout, and you will get 20% off your first order. That's nativedeo.com/milehigher20 or use the promo code milehigher20 at checkout for 20% off your first order.
During these economically turbulent times, everyone is looking for a way to feel more financially secure. So if you're still needlessly throwing money every month at high interest credit card debt, it's time you checked out Upstart, the revolutionary online lending platform that knows you're more than just a credit score. Unlike other lenders, Upstart can reward you based on your education and job history in the form of a smarter rate. You don't need a degree or a diploma to apply, though. Upstart lets you skip going to the bank because it's completely online. They also offer loans from $1,000 to $50,000, and your loan amount will be determined based on your credit, income, and certain other information provided in your loan application, and not all applicants will qualify for the full amount. But it allows you to consolidate your debt into one easy fixed rate payment, which is the fastest way to get out of debt. Free yourself from the burden of high interest credit card debt and get back to using your money your way with Upstart. See why Upstart has 4.9 out of 5 rating on Trustpilot and hurry to upstart.com/milehigher to find out how low your Upstart rate can be. Checking your rate only takes a few minutes. That's upstart.com/milehigher. So even though Ray's injuries were consistent with a fall from a high point, his death was ruled undetermined by the medical examiner. So Allison claims that she actually met with a medical examiner at one point, and the medical examiner told her something very interesting. She says, quote, "I met with the medical examiner and I closed the door. And she said, I know what they're trying to do and we are not closing this case."
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Because clearly they think there is something more to this here. It just needs more investigation. Allison goes on to say that they said that what wasn't consistent with the fall was the way that his shins were broken. And that's all she would say to her. So clearly the medical examiner saw enough evidence to suggest this could possibly be foul play, because I guess apparently the way the shins were broken, that wasn't consistent with a fall like that. And I guess they were saying that in order for that to happen, it would have had to have been a straight, like a directly straight feet first drop where your feet are hitting first in order to break the shins like that. And there wasn't a way to do that, I guess, from off of the building, because he would have had to jump out and over.
Right. To get far enough, because the landing point is so far from the top of the building. That like he humanly could not have possibly made it just by jumping feet first. And, you know, it just doesn't make any sense.
If you were to jump off that building, it would have probably been more of like a tumbling fall.
Yeah.
You know.
Or was he pushed, or was he dropped out of something?
Right, exactly. So that's what they start to look at. But the police obviously are leaning towards this is a probable suicide, and they just straight up stopped actively pursuing leads in the case. Like they just stopped investigating it, which is very weird because, you know, soon after they do this, there more and more stuff starts trickling out. And obviously, in any case, if the medical examiner rules it as undetermined, then that means the police should still be actively investigating that case.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out.
So there might be something more going on there and a reason for why the police didn't want to continue investigating this case. A lot of people speculate that maybe there's some sort of cover-up even involved with
Paid
this.
off. Yeah, you never know.
You never know.
That stuff does happen. And with how weird this case is, I mean, something is going on that isn't right. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it's absolutely what's going on here. There's something not
There's
right
missing
about this.
pieces, and I think there's definitely some type of cover-up
Right.
going on.
In order for the suicide theory to even make sense, he would have had to go up 14 stories to the very top of the Belvedere building, which again, at the top of the building, there is no like railings or anything. So you could very much jump off of it. But in order to just access that, he would have had to go through places that were most likely locked, doors that were locked. You know, it's not like they just let you go to the top of the building.
It's
I mean, that's
really
dangerous.
weird.
Why would they let you do that?
Right. And it's also weird to think about, you know, if he did commit suicide, his day doesn't line up with that at all. Like, he was talking to people on the phone. He went out and bought a book for dummies. It's almost like you're starting something new.
Yeah.
And then, you know, he gets this phone call and just runs out of the house
Yeah. No.
and goes and kills himself. Like, it's pretty obvious that that is not possible. It just doesn't make any sense. And it seems like his family from the beginning just knew that that wasn't
They're
even,
like, something is up with this. This is not, he wouldn't do this for one. They were like, he's just not the kind of guy that would do this. And plus, they did have all these future plans. They were planning to move back to California. They were planning for a trip.
God, I just wish I knew who this house guest was, because they're such an important part of this. They were like the last person to see him. And, you know, they said that that call came in. They saw how he was acting. I mean, who is this person and why are they protecting them?
Yeah.
It's weird. Normally that type of person in a case like this would be featured in the, you know, documentaries. And I don't know. I get some weird vibes about that.
So one of the theories that's out there is that he was mentally unstable, which his family completely disputes. They say he was completely mentally stable and he didn't suffer from depression or any other type of disorder. And so there would be no reason for him to end his life. Now, we do know that obviously just because somebody, you know, isn't diagnosed with that or shows outwardly that they're depressed, that they're internally, there's not, you know, a crisis going on. So,
I mean, there's always a possibility, but with the rest of the information we have here, it just does not make sense.
yeah. And not only that, if Ray were to take his life, why would he go to the top of the Belvedere building and jump off? He was deathly afraid of heights.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, I'm really afraid of heights. There's no way.
So if you're
I would even think
suicidal,
of
would you
that.
even
Yeah.
do that?
No, that doesn't make sense.
There'd be another way that you would do it.
And it's just weird, like random time of the day. It's just, it does not sit well with me. I mean, I don't know if anyone, I didn't read any theories online that said they really think he committed suicide.
No.
Did you?
No.
No.
I mean, nobody's out there like trying to argue that that's what
Yeah,
happened because
it
it's so
seems so
obvious that he didn't. So another reason for why people don't believe he committed suicide is because a lot of people in a lot of cases, if they do take their own life, they do leave a suicide note behind of some kind. Now, when Angel is actually searching for clues in Ray's office, he actually did discover a note which was taped behind his computer. Now, this note wasn't, you know, a normal, I guess, suicide note, like where it's, you know, saying goodbye and love your family. This was a very, very bizarre letter that Ray had written. And it was addressed to, quote, brothers and sisters, and it incorporated terms used by the Freemasons. And the letter actually began by saying, brothers and sisters, right now around the world, volcanoes are erupting. What an awesome sight. Whom virtue unites, death will not separate.
That's a very strange thing to say.
So that last phrase, whom virtue unites, death will not separate, is actually a Latin motto that they engrave into Masonic rings. And then after that, the letter just gets more and more bizarre. He goes on to say, that was a well-played game. Congratulations to all who participated, but it was time to wake up. So here I am. Life is a test to see if you can control your spirit. Take care and enjoy the festivities.
Super weird.
Okay. I guess that's kind of enlightening a little bit.
He also referenced TV shows, books, music, movies that he liked, including The Game,
Yeah.
which is a movie. And he listed several famous people who had died, including Stanley Kubrick and Christopher Reeve.
The letter was also filled with cryptic references. Ray said, "I stand before you a man who understands the purpose and value of our secrets. That's why I cherish them as secrets."
Wow. There you go.
Yeah, yeah. It also included a long list of Ray's family members, though he left out several close relatives. So obviously when his brothers reading this and Allison are reading this are very confused. They're like, why would he leave out certain people? Like, this doesn't make sense for a suicide note at all. Ray then goes on to ask the undefined brothers and sisters to make himself and everyone else on this list 5 years younger. He also mentioned his friend Porter Stansberry, and he wrote, "Before I continue with my instructions for the council and the prize for my service, I'd like to allow Porter Stansberry to choose his prize." And he also continued to repeat the phrase, "Well done, Porter." And he typed the letter in a very tiny font. The font size is so small that it almost makes it difficult to read.
Very small.
And then he printed out this letter, tore off pieces of it until it was about 7 inches long. And then he folded the paper several times and covered it in plastic before taping it behind his computer.
Okay, what the fuck?
That's very, very weird.
I'm really curious to see what people think about this, or if anyone has a better idea of what he was trying to do with this. It's so weird.
Yeah. It really doesn't make any sense at all. Like, if he was doing this prior to the phone call, because he couldn't have like whipped this out in like a minute.
No.
Like, clearly this would have taken some time to write. So he had clearly been working on this throughout the day. But the question is, at which point did he actually tape this to the back of it? Maybe it was taped prior. I mean, we don't know exactly when he wrote it, but according to Allison, she believes that he wrote it that day because there was the scraps of paper that he tore off were actually in the trash still.
Wow.
So that's how she thinks that she knows that it was written that day. But why? What was the purpose of this letter? And even the FBI studied this letter. They sent it off to see if there was some type of code being used, because you could almost look at this and think, okay, maybe this is written in code of some sort. But nobody's been able to come to the conclusion that this is a coded message at all. So in regards to the suicide theory, it's also important to note that the actual structure of the hotel doesn't support this theory either. The hotel had a mansard roof, which is a complex roof design with 4 sides, and each side has an upper slope and a lower slope, with the lower slope being very steep. And to get from the top roof to the roof below where Ray landed, he would have had to take a running start. So bear in mind that we do know that Ray was wearing flip-flops, or maybe he took them off and he was barefoot if he had been, running to jump off of the Belvedere building. But even, running at full speed, the amount of momentum he would need to get to where the hole is on that lower annex is nearly impossible.
It is
for
impossible
him to get there. You just can't make that jump. And Ray's brother Angel actually talked with Belvedere staff, and they agreed that based on how Ray landed on the lower roof, he had to have been pushed off of the building from a different point instead of him running and jumping off. But unfortunately, these employees spoke off of the record, and as far as Angel knew, they didn't take this information to the police. They believe that he could have made it onto the lower roof. He had jumped from a window ledge on the 11th floor. But in order to get to the ledge, he would have needed to go through a private room or office to gain access. So even if he did make it to a window, it would have been very difficult for him, a 6'5" man, to crawl through this little opening in the window and then walk potentially barefoot or with flip-flops on this ledge 11 stories up to a point where he would jump off. And why would you do that?
It makes no sense.
Yeah, that'd be extremely difficult. Plus, someone would have seen you. I mean, these are all condos. Somebody would have seen
There's
a man.
people everywhere, windows.
Yeah. Seen a guy walking along the ledge to then jump off, or seen him jump off. What's also suspicious, though, is that the Belvedere staff were not able to supply security video footage, even though there was cameras on the roof, in order to help them piece together what happened to Ray. The building had an advanced system that covered all entry points and many other public spaces, including the stairwells. But a mysterious technical error corrupted the footage, and the police weren't able to recover any of the system's data.
Such bullshit.
This
I'm
always
so
happens.
sick of hearing about that. It happens like every case. Their cameras aren't working. Something's broken. Something's corrupt.
Which, then again, maybe there's something more there. Maybe that's on purpose.
It is on purpose, I think.
What's interesting, though, is that Makita Brotman, who was a resident at the Belvedere, lived on the 5th floor in a unit that overlooked the hole in the roof that Ray's coworkers discovered. And on the night that Rey died, she said she heard a loud crashing sound outside her window around 10 p.m. She didn't investigate, but it was odd enough that she wrote about it in her journal. And even after coming forward with this information and after they found Ray's body, the police never questioned Makita because they just pretty much chalked this up to a suicide and stopped investigating it altogether. But her vantage point to the crime scene allowed her to watch the investigation unfold in real time. She watched the police try to recreate the alleged suicide jump from the upper roof to the lower roof. And when the police left for the day, she ended up wandering down to the crime scene. It wasn't closed off or roped off, so she could get very close to the hole where Rey fell. And she noticed right away that the hole seemed much larger from the inside than the outside. At least half of the lower roof had collapsed by this point. This is very, very interesting because one theory is that Rey maybe was dropped from a helicopter to his death.
That's what you think.
I thought that right away when I saw this. I was like, he must have been dropped from a helicopter.
I mean, it makes sense. And then you think back to the fact that Porter had, flown into their wedding on a private helicopter. He clearly had access to those.
Right. And
That's weird,
what a perfect way to commit a murder too, because there's absolutely no evidence.
Push someone out of a helicopter?
Yeah.
Whoa. I don't know. That's so crazy.
What's crazy to me is that the police never considered this. I don't think they ever investigated this angle because I'm sure there's some records. Well, that's the thing too, is that you can't just go get somebody's records. You need probable cause to search somebody for that. No, but I bet you there's record of a helicopter flying around that area that night somewhere.
Yeah.
And they just never went and found it because they didn't think they needed to.
I wonder though if someone, I guess it's hard to say because my thought with that was, wouldn't someone have heard a helicopter? Wouldn't someone have reported something like that? But it could have been high enough up that no one would have seen it or heard it.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
That possible?
Absolutely.
And that's how wouldn't he be a little more, even more injured and damaged?
No, well, I mean, he was.
Yeah, he was pretty
really
bad.
It was as if he was dropped straight from, straight down feet first, almost like making somebody walk off a plank. You know how pirates used to do that? Maybe they just made him walk off, or they just dropped him. Maybe he was already dead and they just dropped him from the helicopter.
That's possible as well. But that's so weird. A weird way to get rid of a body, drop them into a city.
Well, they know that he's going to be so messed up that there's going to be no way for them to determine.
That is odd.
Anything else prior happened because his body's going to be so mangled. I mean, his body was in horrible, horrible shape. I mean, he was almost unrecognizable from the injuries that he had. Wow. I just can't believe it took 6 days for them to find it. Nobody in the hotel, no residents looked out their windows before those 6 days to see a hole.
I know.
But some people question this helicopter theory because if you were going to, get rid of somebody's body, you're right by the harbor in Baltimore. So why wouldn't you just go fly out over the ocean and drop them into the ocean,
and
where nobody would ever find them? Mm-hmm. And the answer to this might be simple though. Rey was pushed out of the helicopter and he wasn't dead yet. And pushing him onto the street or a building guaranteed his death. So maybe they thought if he dropped him into the water, he would survive and that would just, he would be able to tell everybody what happened to him.
That's so odd.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe his fall was a result of a struggle of some kind. If Rey had been kidnapped or if he was being threatened in some way, he would have likely tried to defend himself. And maybe the perpetrator may have pushed him out by accident during a fight or on purpose in order to get rid of him. A former staff member of the Belvedere building, Gary Shivers, was actually asked about the possibility of Rey being dropped from a helicopter. And given how his body landed and the building's architecture, Gary said, "That's the only possible thing I can think of." The slope of Belvedere's roof not only made it impossible for Rey to have jumped himself, but it also made it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for someone to push him hard enough for him to land in that spot on the lower roof. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense that his glasses and his phone were virtually fine, just fine.
No.
In either of those scenarios. So then somebody went down there and placed
after he fell from a helicopter. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all.
No, because if you did that, you probably would have thought somebody would have heard it or noticed somebody dropping to the ground there. And
That is so weird.
Why would they risk going back to the ground and having somebody run over and throw his stuff there? That's what's so weird.
No way. And why? Why wouldn't they just get rid of his stuff?
Right.
Like,
why leave it there?
Yeah.
Or try to stage it like a suicide. That seems like a very difficult way to stage a suicide. So the medical examiner also noted that the broken bones in Ray's shins were not likely caused by a fall. The lacerations on Ray's body were straight, long cuts. It looked as though his body had slid through the hole in the roof rather than crashing through it. And that's another thing that came to my mind as well is maybe this hole was just made artificially. Like maybe Ray didn't actually go through the hole at all and he was just brutally murdered and they somehow staged the scene. You know, if it was a stage scene, maybe they put the hole in the ceiling in some way.
To make it look like he committed a suicide.
Right.
I don't know though. That's like, just seems like so much work.
Yeah.
We could just drop him in the ocean if you really, I don't understand.
And when did somebody hear somebody like putting a hole in a roof?
Yeah. Or
see something? Like when did they do that, in the middle of the night or something?
And if they dropped something to break it, that object would have been found.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's super weird.
It doesn't make any sense.
This case really makes my brain hurt.
But again, it's important to note that the homicide detective who originally worked on Ray's case, Michael Baer, actually did say he believed the scene was staged. So if Ray was murdered, then he must have had some enemies. One theory speculates that Ray's death is related to his time working for Agora Incorporated. Maybe when he left his house, he was rushing to meet someone from the company. This is less likely since he was wearing casual clothes and flip-flops and didn't bother changing into some nicer clothes. Or it could be an indication of how desperate he was. In 2005, Ray was the Rebound Report editor, which was a financial newsletter published by Agora as a part of his job, which recommended stocks for people to buy. But some of these stocks that he recommended weren't doing well, and Ray actually felt guilty that people could be buying these stocks based on his advice and losing money. But soon after leaving Agora, the company actually came under investigation for disseminating false stock information and defrauding public investors. And this case actually went to trial in 2005, and in 2007, the company was ordered to pay $1.5 million in compensation for the victims and civil penalties. So is it possible that because of this bad advice that Ray gave in this newsletter that people were really pissed off because they lost a lot of money and maybe people involved with this company wanted to take care of him? I don't know. It just seems like a very weird reason to go and like murder somebody. I mean, I guess people get murdered over money all the time, so it's definitely possible. But
I mean, money makes people do crazy things for sure.
It does. But I don't know. How much money was lost there?
I know.
Or maybe it was just Porter was upset because his company was now, has a horrible reputation and was being sued. So maybe Porter or somebody else that worked for Agora or owned Agora wanted, Ray taken care of as a result of that court case. But at the end of the day, a lot of people really speculate about the bizarre letter that he wrote because what the hell was that and why?
Really? And why did he put it in plastic? Why did he tape it to the laptop?
Yeah, it's very, very weird. A lot of people think he was struggling with an undiagnosed illness, a mental illness of some sort.
I was going to say, I mean, it could be possible. His letter didn't make a whole lot of sense either.
No.
And it seemed very emotional and kind of like he had been up in his head for a while, just thinking about a lot of different things and life and the meaning of it, deep thoughts.
Somebody actually suggested it, just a fan of this case, suggested that maybe he was struggling from something called Truman Show delusion, which psychology today explains is when people believe they are in a TV show-like scenario.
Oh, like on the Truman Show.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. I've never heard of that.
Because based on all of the film references that are in his letter.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people think that he maybe believed he was in some sort of alternate reality where he's playing this game. That
was a well-played game. Congratulations to all who participated. But it's time to wake up. So here I am. Life is a test to see if you can control your spirit. Take care and enjoy the festivities. Yeah. I mean, something deep is going on here. He's having some very complex thoughts.
And all the Freemason stuff. Why is he all of a sudden super interested in the Freemasons?
I wonder if he knew something. Like he just had information or had come across something he wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's referring to the whole game as, this financial thing that's been going on that he found out about.
Yeah.
Some type of scheme.
Right. Some people think he like just came across some information he wasn't supposed to know about, maybe major criminal activity that his former company in Porter was involved in.
But you think you'd write in the note, like, I might be targeted by so-and-so because I know this. And, it's like weird things to write in a note if you knew.
Why wouldn't you leave more direct clues?
It seems like his mind was really complex at the time. Like you know what I mean? Like he just had a lot going on. Mm-hmm. And it makes you think there must have been something in his life making him think so deeply.
Well, maybe he was in the recruitment process for the Freemasons when all this went down.
So weird.
And
I just don't understand this.
Maybe, some people think literally the Freemasons like took him out because one of the rules is you're not supposed to obviously share any secrets or anything like that with the general public. And even if you do that in code, so some people think because he wrote this letter in code, maybe, there is a Freemason out there that can decipher it, that it's like written in some type of secret code of theirs. And maybe this blank check he left with the letter could have been a ways or means to pay his initiation fee to join the Freemasons.
What the hell? That is weird. But the rest of the letter doesn't really make sense with that.
Yeah, all the films and stuff just doesn't
I don't know.
It was just like a bunch of references to movies that Allison confirmed that he actually liked it. Like it wasn't some random obscure things. They were all things that he actually was into.
So he really wrote it.
Some think that Ray's letter could be no letter at all, but instead a script for a speech based on the dramatic opening line, which is consistent with the pattern of speech writing. The brothers and sisters right now around the world, volcanoes are erupting. What an awesome sight. But at the end, the writing gets harder to read because the font size gets smaller. And the last line of the letter likely said, and specifically let me say that I expect M. Night Shyamalan to continue coming up with great ideas and great movies. I certainly enjoyed his movies, The Sixth Sense, The Village, The Others, Signs, Unbreakable. But then other lines just sound like total nonsense when you read them aloud.
Mm-hmm. Even that kind of sounds like nonsense. I mean, what was the point of writing that down? Who are you talking to?
Yeah.
So odd.
It's very weird. Now, this is interesting, though. So when you look at this letter, somebody figured out that the way that he wrote the letter, if you kind of look at it in this way, it spells out help.
Because it's so weird how it's cut on the end. It's kind of cut like the part of a P.
Why would he tear it? Why do you tear pieces off of it if he wasn't trying to do this, though?
It does kind of look like that.
But it's very loosely look like you could draw it in a couple places and kind of get like H and E and L. It's not like
it's just grasping at straws.
Yeah, I think so. But probably one of the most interesting things, and this has become a theory in itself, is Ray's reference to the David Fincher film, The Game. Now, The Game is a mystery action thriller released in 1997, and the plot is about a wealthy man who receives the gift of playing the game from his brother. And the similarities and coincidences between Ray's life and the film are very striking. The protagonist has a personal history with suicide. He witnessed his father's suicide when he was younger. And after being psychologically tortured by the game, the character jumps off a building and falls through a second roof made of glass. But none of it is real. It's all a part of the game.
Whoa, yeah.
And that scene, if you've never seen it before, it's literally what we think could have happened to Ray falling through that building at a hotel. Very much the same way.
He must have, why would he? It's like, okay, maybe he was a big fan of the movie and he wanted to like recreate it. But he knows that there's not glass. He knows it's not the same situation.
Well, some people speculate that maybe Ray thought there was a pool in that annex because there wasn't
used to have a pool.
Right.
Wouldn't he check?
Well, yeah, wouldn't you check? And
I don't know.
He thought he was going to go through a metal roof and be fine.
And he just all day is doing all this weird shit. And then at 6:30 gets a call to go and jump off a roof to jump in a pool and reenact a game. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
No.
But I don't understand. I've never seen that movie, so it's hard for me to even.
But maybe if you're dealing, you have that Truman delusion disorder or whatever, or something, other type of mental illness.
I'd like to know more about
that.
though. I've never really heard of that. And I don't know how much that's actually been studied, or I'd like to hear some other cases of people who've had that Truman delusion. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Okay. But even if that is the case and he was recreating the game, it still doesn't make sense. He couldn't have made that jump.
No. There was no tangible way that he could make it out alive after doing that.
Yeah.
So, and even his family, I mean, his family has even obviously read about this theory, and they're like, there's no, we can't find any tangible connection between this movie and his death. There's just nothing there. It's definitely interesting to consider because there is a lot of similarities between the movies that he mentioned and the way that he dies potentially. Throughout all the different films that he put in there, between Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, about people who choose to permanently erase painful memories from the past. So maybe, there was a reason he put these in there, because there was a lot of things he was dealing with in his life, and they're all sort of clues to give us a perspective on what he was thinking at this point in time. I think there could definitely be some type of connection there, but do I think there's a direct connection between the movie references and his death? I don't necessarily think so. So people have even come up with a theory involving the M. Night Shyamalan movies that Ray included in his letter, and somehow by putting these different pieces together in these different M. Night Shyamalan movies together, that basically all signs point to him basically saying that the people responsible for his death was Stansbury Research and Porter, because of all these different numbers. I don't even want to go through it. It's very complicated. We'll put a picture of it in there so you can kind of look at it in a link. But apparently, if you go through all these movies, that through these different years and difference between when the movies come out, that it spells out the address of Stansbury Research based on what he mentioned in his letter.
I mean, that's complicated though
it's very
think
complex.
Through. If you're going to, why wouldn't you just write down the address?
Yeah.
If you're going to be dead, just write it down.
Right.
I don't know. That's weird.
Yeah, that's very, very weird. So obviously Ray's wife, Allison, was completely just taken aback by what had happened. And she was extremely upset that the police weren't investigating it, and that it was very clear to her that something foul play happened to him. Something happened. It wasn't just suicide. So Allison went through all of his journals looking for clues, but she never did find anything that explained what happened to him. So earlier we mentioned Makita Brotman, who was a resident at the Belvedere Hotel. She actually went on to write a book called An Unexplained Death, The True Story of a Body at the Belvedere. And while researching her book, Makita became obsessed with the building's dark past. The Belvedere is considered one of the most haunted buildings in the state and is part of the Mount Vernon walking ghost tours. Multiple suicides and deaths have occurred at the Belvedere. And there's been a lot of deaths that are kind of similar to what happened to Ray, as far as jumping off the building, falling through the building. And there's a lot of different instances of just people committing suicide there as well. And it's interesting that there's even a paranormal aspect to this as well. And maybe that plays into this as well. Kind of like Lisa Lamb and the Cecil Hotel. Yes. Maybe there's something, more paranormal happening here too. I'm
honestly surprised this case isn't as popular as Elisa Lamb's, because it's so similar in so many ways.
It really is. I'm surprised too that it's not as popular. I'm sure it is pretty popular online.
Well, now that it's gotten on Unsolved Mysteries and stuff.
Yeah. But it's definitely given it new life for sure. But what's probably most suspicious about this whole thing is that as the police continued their investigation into Ray's death, Agora Incorporated allegedly put a gag order on all employees about the case, including those who worked with Ray at Porter's company in Baltimore. The company has officially denied this claim, but nobody at the company has spoken to police, has given them any information. Yeah, Porter refuses to give them any information regarding, this case whatsoever, or Ray.
And I wonder if that house guest has anything to do with that company, or was another person
I'm wondering
there?
Yeah, that's definitely.
Maybe it was even Porter. I mean, maybe. I can't. If that was the case, I'm sure it would be out there. But yeah, it's just weird.
And off the record, Porter Stansbury has allegedly said that they didn't want employees talking to the police or media because the company wanted, quote, the entire situation to just die down and not make it a big media event. Which this guy was like best friends with Ray, supposedly.
Like, oh, this is an inconvenience.
Why wouldn't you be trying to do everything you possibly can to
sketchy vibes
to find out the truth about what happened to one of your best friends' deaths? Like, what happened to them? If there was even an inkling that somebody murdered him, why wouldn't Porter be leading the charge for that and helping Allison? But they've completely cut communication. They don't talk to each other at all. He moved away even. Like, he's definitely tried to distance himself from this whole event. Apparently early on, though, Porter did speak to the media briefly. And according to Allison, he spread rumors that her and Ray had been in marriage counseling and that Ray had psychological issues. I had also seen there was rumors that potentially Ray was having a gay affair with somebody at the Belvedere Hotel. But it's important to note there's no proof of that, and there's no proof of Ray ever even being inside the hotel.
Yeah.
There's no footage of him on surveillance cameras that were working. There's nobody that saw him go through the hotel. Allison believes that Porter made these statements to the media in order to get the police to ultimately determine that Ray most likely died of suicide. Porter has actually recently spoke publicly about Ray's death for the first time since 2006, obviously following this release of the Unsolved Mysteries reboot. And Porter said that he felt like the show implied that he was involved in his friend's death and said he was shocked and hurt by this. He also said that the reason I've never commented about Ray's death publicly first and foremost is because I never thought there was any mystery about why or how he died.
What?
Which I'm like, what? Have you been paying attention at all?
Talking about? Then explain it, Porter.
Yeah.
This is so weird.
And why wouldn't you help clear this up or prove that it was suicide? Why wouldn't you be more involved in the investigation? And obviously Allison is very skeptical of this. She questioned why Porter never spoke up before and why he hasn't tried to contact her since June of 2006.
Wow. Yeah,
shortly after his body was found.
Why wouldn't you be there for her? It's not like she immediately assumed it was him or like made him out to be a suspect. Why would you avoid her and just disappear like that? You'd be there for your friend, you know, and their wife who is alone now. It just doesn't make any sense.
No.
And then we also found out Agora had hired a PR team.
Yeah.
A crisis management team.
Yeah, they did.
Right before this Netflix thing came out.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you could say like, okay, that's
they just
standard,
knew
but
inherently there'd be stuff coming in, but
I don't know. It seems like they're really trying to protect themselves. And I would not be shocked if it had something to do with that job.
Yeah. Well, not only that, both Allison and the detective Michael Bear, who had worked originally on the case, remember Porter dodging calls from police in the weeks after his death. And they also believe that he put a gag order on all of his employees shortly after his body was found as well. What's also interesting too is that as far as Allison knows and remembers, Porter never attended either of the two memorial services that they had for him.
Yeah, explain that.
What's that about? No That's very suspicious, if you ask me.
Very.
So at the end of the day, what happened to Ray? What do you think is the most plausible theory for his death?
I mean, I don't know. I, of course, don't really understand physics that well. So the whole him having fallen out of the sky is confusing to me. I don't understand how exactly that would work, or I don't know what to compare it to. I don't know a lot about how people end up when they fall through buildings, but
well, I mean, it doesn't happen that often.
I know
people fall through
exactly
a roof.
But. I know, but I mean, to me, the most logical does sound like possibly a helicopter, especially because he would rent them.
He had them, yeah. He flew on them. We know for a fact he did.
And I just don't think he jumped or fell or was pushed, because it just doesn't make any sense. Again, I don't have a super great understanding of physics, but I mean, it doesn't add up.
No. Is it possible that he was lured somewhere? Like they lured him to go to a place for, that call. Because I keep going back to that call.
That call, yeah.
Whatever happened on that call, if we only knew what was said or who called, would lead us, I think, to the answer. Because I think he was brought, somebody met him maybe at the parking lot where he parked his car and abducted him at that point, and then maybe took him to a helicopter and then, waited till late at night or whatever. Or
And I'm sure people can poke holes in that theory too. Like,
you can poke holes in all the theories.
I don't, at the end of the day, really have any idea.
Another theory,
I just don't understand.
No, I don't think we'll ever understand. I mean, another theory that's out there, a lot of people believe, is that maybe at the top of that parking structure, something happened and Ray ended up actually getting hit by a vehicle.
Right.
And
we did talk about this.
The vehicle was going at 25 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And if it were to, brake right before the edge of that parking structure, then after Ray gets hit, he could have been pushed the 20 feet or whatever away from that edge to the hole and fell through the hole. But I'm like, the question comes down to what was the force at which you'd have to fall from those different levels or heights in order to go through that roof? And I'm just surprised they didn't conduct all these experiments and try to
the police should be doing
260-pound bag, which would, how much Ray weighed and drop it from those different things to see if it makes another hole in the roof. Because I think the whole hole in the roof is where the answer lies of, how did he die? Was he killed before and they staged that scene? Or was he in fact dropped from a height? Or did he jump?
I have no idea personally. I really want to hear what you guys have to say about this case. Definitely leave us your opinions in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or you can even tweet at us and let us know what you think if you're listening at Mile Higher Pod.
Yeah, we definitely want to know what you guys think about this. For me, I'm still torn between the different theories, but I think I have to stick with my gut, and that is that he was dropped out of a helicopter.
Wow.
I think that makes sense, and
makes the most sense to me.
His injuries are consistent with a traumatic fall from a great height. It's really the only way that I can see somebody going through a roof is if you're dropped from extremely high point. And otherwise I really don't see how anything else really plays out and makes sense in all of this.
Do you have any theories, Janelle?
No, I was just going to kind of say, I don't know, the helicopter thing really weirds me out. But the thing that makes me believe it could be true is the fact that there is the hole. Because like you said, Josh, I don't know, even though he's, 260 pounds, the roof's got to be pretty weak to break through with that. I thought he would kind of bounce off of it or something. So I don't know. I guess the helicopter thing, if he was up high enough, then he got enough momentum going.
Yeah. Definitely let us know what you guys think, but we'll go ahead and wrap it up there today. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the Mile Higher Podcast. Also, be sure to check out that episode on Unsolved Mysteries if you haven't seen it. It definitely is interesting to see Allison talk about it. And obviously, our thoughts go out to her, and having to go through this is definitely traumatic and just horrible.
I can't imagine not having answers like that.
I know.
Or not even to what happened.
No. And just the fact that police won't do anything about it. It's clearly something happened. There's foul play here, clearly.
If this happened to you, I'd be on a mission the rest of my life to figure it out. And especially when he left all these clues.
Right.
It's so weird.
Again, sunglasses and the phone.
Yeah.
We're not broken. What's the deal with that?
Odd.
Very odd. But be sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes. It does really help us out. Follow us on Spotify. And until next time, stay safe.
And stay woke.